Hi, everybody, and welcome to Circle of Fellows, episode 94. I can't believe we've got 94 of these things under our belt. I'm Shel Holtz. I am Senior Director of Communications at Webcor. We are a commercial general contractor operating in California and headquartered in San Francisco. I'm at home today in the San Francisco East Bay and joined by a truly international panel. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in just a second, but I do want to let everyone know first that our conversation today is about artificial intelligence. Nobody's talking about it, so we thought we'd ignite the conversation. I actually did a presentation for IABC San Francisco on this topic just yesterday. And I also want to let everybody know that you are welcome to participate in this conversation. You are watching this on YouTube Live, and there is a chat feature there. And anything you enter into the chat feature, I see here, and I can put it up on the screen where our panelists can see it. And you can and should be part of this conversation, which we will start in just a moment. But first, let's meet the panel, starting with Sue Human. Sue.
Hi, Shel. Thanks for having me today. Sue Human. I'm based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I am the co-owner of a boutique communications agency. We deal with clients in all three sectors, and we have been using AI. So I'm interested in this conversation today.
Can't wait to hear how, which is actually going to be the first question I'll ask. Hi, Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin McCaslin. I'm Senior Director of Corporate Communications for Healthcare Service Corporation. I am based in Dallas, Texas, and I'm in my home office today. I oversee all employee communication for the company, so all of the channels that we use to communicate with our employee audience, and then also creating a lot of the business content that goes out to that audience.
Glad to have you here with us. How's the weather in Texas?
Dude. You can't see there's a ceiling fan going above me. It's brutal. It's now officially a dry heat because it's been so hot that it finally burned off the humidity. So I went out to water my plants the other day on the deck, and it was like I didn't sweat. It was brutally hot, but I didn't sweat because it's like being in Phoenix.
Yep.
So there's that.
There's that. Yeah. My heart goes out to you. Hi, Adrian.
Hey, Shel, and hi, everyone. And yes, I can relate to the dry heat, Robin. It's a very Australian thing. Although I'm Adrian Cropley from Melbourne, Australia, but I am in Queensland today, so a little bit more humid heat. I'm the founding partner of the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence, which is an organisation that trains and develops communication professionals globally and works with organisations to build their communication skills. Loving the conversations around AI. Absolutely thrilled to be part of this one, and had some great exposure to AI so far. And like you, Shel, I seem to be talking at a lot of events recently around AI.
It's kind of all that anybody wants to talk about anymore. It's like the metaverse and Web3 have just evaporated, which of course they haven't. And AI is going to play a big part in this convergence of these technologies, AI, Web3, and the metaverse, which we may talk about later. But first, I'd really be interested in how you're using it on the job. I know that I use some kind of AI tool every single day, and often more than one. But I'm interested in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let's go for it. I'm happy to lead off that one. It's really interesting since we did, and just a little bit of background context, in the centre we did some research back in 2018 and 2019. Mary Hills, another IABC Fellow, and Sia Papagiorgio and myself led that research. And it was interesting to hear what was happening only 2 years ago around communication professionals. Only about 17% were being exposed or actively using AI. It'd be interesting to see that figure today, because I think, like most of us, people are using it and not being afraid to use it, I think, is really the important issue. On a personal level, Descriptor is one of my favorites. I know using using that. And if anybody doesn't know Descriptor, it's a fabulous tool for taking your video content, scripting it, but also being able to use that content to change the words, which then edits the video. So, we're seeing both podcasters and anybody that's producing video using that tool. It's got the ability to add your own words back in, so you can add stuff that wasn't previously there. And so it just makes the job of things like video editing and podcast editing so very easy. ChatGPT, obviously, we were onto that fairly quickly, and a great tangible example of using this, and I was using this for one of our events that is coming up, a retreat that we're doing in Bali at the end of October. I got ChatGPT I pointed it to the website. I got it to look at the website. My instructions was to produce a business case that communication professionals could use within their organization to convince their manager why they should attend this event. And I tell you what, in 30 seconds, it came back with a pretty compelling business case where I only had to do minor edits to it. You can't just copy and take the whole text, but it saved probably 3, 4, even 5 hours of work, and also using it for things like research. So yeah, there are a couple of tangible examples, but I'm probably discovering a new tool every other day, using it for something. And I have to say, I absolutely love Grammarly Go, which is the AI component to Grammarly now, is absolutely fabulous for giving more context and additional information. So that's where I'm using it so far.
Well, who wants to go next?
I'll go. Since I work in healthcare, we tend to be a more conservative industry. But outside of communication, in the business itself, not only our company, but other healthcare companies are looking at how we use AI to serve the people, like in our case, who have our health insurance. And there's a lot of interesting work going on around that. Within communications, in our group, we're getting ready to completely overhaul our intranet, and we're going to be working with we're working with an outside company, but we're also working with an innovation group within our company who is focused on AI and things like that, to say, how do we maximize AI to our benefit, so that when employees are using this new experience, that AI is helping serve up what they need most and making them more productive, so they spend less time there and get what they need, great search results, get in and out of there. Other than that, personally, I'm doing the same things. I'm playing with a lot of different tools just to see what it'll do. And this wasn't your question, Shell, but I feel like I want to share it, and I would attribute it to somebody, but I just saw it without attribution. So I thought it was a great comment. It was, for people who are afraid of AI, it was, look, AI is not going to replace you, but you might be replaced by somebody who uses AI. So it was about the evolution of who we are as professionals, and this is the next evolution. And it's like being unafraid to incorporate it in the ways that make sense for your clients or for your organization is what you need to be doing.
That's brilliant. And I can build on both of you, because we are using AI mostly as a research tool at this point. AI can certainly generate content for you, but it will never be the copy paste kind of content that I think people are afraid will happen, and hence cause job loss. AI can't capture things like client voice or preferred terms, or conversely trigger terms, and pull them out of language and that sort of thing. Sentiment. It's really hard for AI to replace the human thinking brain that applies that subtle layer on top of content creation. But it's a great tool for research. We find that AI can help inspire us to think about things in a new way or a different way, because it'll say, hey, have you thought about this? And we go, oh, yeah, that's a cool idea. And then we will take that as a springboard to developing content and so forth for our client. I want to mention just before we started, I was chatting with Shell, and I mentioned that the USC Annenberg Center for Public Relations just issued a 2023 survey of communication professionals, and it's called Fascinated and Frightened about AI. And I think that captures it really well. I think there's a lot that people are fascinated by, but also just a little bit scared because of pending legal and ethical issues around using AI. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole yet, but I think that the title of that study is quite telling, because I really feel that reflects the times.
It does kind of sum it up too, Sue, when I hear that, because I reflective on the study that we did. 43% of communication professionals said they wanted to actively start playing with and exploring. So I think that fascination part is there, but I think history's shown us that there is a little bit of fear of stepping into it, and I mean we found this through the realm of social media as well. And again, without opening up a big topic, I think we have some parallels between when social media came into our world and now AI is coming into the world. I know we were chatting about it before, hey, there's this terror in this new evolution that's coming. And should we really be scared, or should we be building our knowledge around AI?
I don't think it's going away. So I feel like anything, and like social media, people thought, oh, well, it'll be a flash in the pan. But I mean, as someone who joined Twitter the first time in 2007, it hasn't really gone anywhere. So, well, remains to be
Except
seen.
downhill. Yeah.
Well,
Downhill, yes.
Threads, people. But I feel like it is something that we're going to have to embrace, and whether or not you decide to dive in wholeheartedly or you just dip a toe, I feel like there's things there that you're going to have to learn how to embrace. And frankly, when I started my career on a typewriter, if I hadn't learned to adapt over the years, I'd still be using that typewriter.
Yeah,
Like that manual one that I have behind me over here.
I think I heard that one.
Working typewriter, you can have a replacement ribbon for it. One of the things that I think helps communicators is understanding some categories of usage. One of them, I found that it was articulated very well by one of the panelists on the panel that I moderated at the IABC World Conference in Toronto in June. And that is for stuff that only needs to be good enough. They made the point that a lot of what we crank out does not require great creativity or high degrees of writing skill. It just needs to be good enough. It's the summary of the workshop or what have you that somebody has asked for. And what ChatGPT produces tends to be good enough in a lot of instances. So I'll give you an example. We have a wellness newsletter. It goes out monthly. And one of the elements of it is what we call the nutrition nugget. And it used to be written by somebody in HR who worked on wellness. She left the company, and for a couple of months, there was nobody writing that. So I had to do it, or I'd have a big empty hole on the newsletter. So I don't have 2 or 3 hours to research, spaghetti squash. So I go to ChatGPT. I say I need 250 words on spaghetti squash, include information about its origins, its nutritional benefits, and how it's used in cooking. Now, what it produced was good enough. I absolutely had to go fact check it because I don't trust it. And I had to do some editing, first of all, to put it in our company's voice. And also there were some bits that were just awkward that needed editing. But ultimately, I spent 15 minutes at it instead of 3 hours, bouncing around websites and looking for relevant information and then sitting and writing it from scratch. Another use for it is getting off that blank page. If you've got writer's block, tell it to write the lead. Explain what the article is about or the story is about, and ask for the lead. You probably won't use it, but it'll be enough for you to go, no, that's not it, but I know what I want to say, and you'll be able to get started. Just two uses right there.
And it's fascinating because when I wanted to use get some inspiration for ideas, it was putting the ideas in there because I completely had a block of going, I need to get creative and I need another title for XYZ. And I just kept reproducing and reproducing. I hated like hundreds of them, but it got the juices flowing. And eventually you came up with something rather than sitting there mulling over it. And I think that's really important. ChatGPT is fabulous for lists. Give me a list of XYZ, or give me 10 points about the advantages of a particular topic. And as you say, it just spits it out. And I think that's really gold to get you moving on stuff. I do a writing course, and it's really funny how since September last year, when I first released the writing course, now we're talking very much around how things like ChatGPT and predictive AI is changing the way that we write and using it as a helpful tool. So now I take some of the exercises in the course. So what the participants have done, I said, okay, let's see how ChatGPT might do this. And some of them that are doing big edits or sorting things into structures, it does it so very quickly and is very close. And it does kind of play on that. It is good enough. And then you just add your flair to it. But the time saving has been absolutely ridiculous. Course members are about falling off their chair because most of them are from government, and government's kind of gone, oh no, it's banned. No, we're not using AI.
Of course. What you and Shell described, I think, is something that would put some people at ease who are concerned about it. But something else came up. I was having a different conversation with some senior communication professionals. And one of the things that we talked about was there are, and have been as long as I've been in the profession, some people who that's what they want to do. They want to write about spaghetti, squash, right? Like they want, and they don't want to grow beyond that. And there's been a comfortable, like, this is my role. I'm in this thing, and this is all I want to do for the next 30 years. I don't want whatever. Those are the things that it's like, well, but you could be using your brain power for a higher purpose. And one of the things that I talk about with my own team and with other comms professionals is setting that aside for the people who just want to do that. It's like, you can use AI for the things that Adrian and Shell described to free you up to become a more strategic partner. Imagine the time savings for the good enough things to allow you to focus on becoming better at communication strategy and becoming better at, being in front of leaders and how you advise them on their communication needs and those kind of things. If you position it that way, it's not something to be afraid of. It's freeing you up for a higher purpose because you've got the brains to do it. So do it.
It's doing the drudge work that nobody likes, but has to be done. If you can turn that over to a machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's what machines excel at, right? That's why you have machines, is they chop your vegetables so that you don't have to sit there with a knife and cut your fingers off.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly it. Plus, AI tools typically scrape the internet for news and information, and algorithms tell you, how often something appears out there in the wide world web. So you get a sense of what people are talking about or what is prominent that's out there. Whether or not you agree with it is a whole different thing. However, the algorithms do point you in that direction, which is also useful. It's just useful to know.
One of the things that I did, and this was a demonstration for somebody who asked for a rundown on how they could use it. This happened to be a healthcare organization. And what I did was I went to their blog and grabbed a couple of articles and ran them through ChatGPT. And I said, what would be the top SEO keywords that should be incorporated into this blog post? And it came back with a list of keywords. And I said, okay, take these keywords. And I grabbed like 5 from the list. And I said, weave these keywords into this post without making it look like you're keyword loading this, right? You can't just toss them in so that they're there. It has to be seamless. look like they belong there, and it did a really good job. Another way to eliminate some of the drudge work of going out and researching keywords and then writing an article that incorporates them.
Yeah.
Oh, I found an interesting piece the other day. This was a blog from a company that does logo work.
Yeah.
And what they did was they took the slogans from 50 companies and asked an AI tool, I think it was ChatGPT, to create new slogans for these 50 companies. And then they surveyed people with the original slogan and the AI written slogan. And 46% of the slogans, they preferred the ones that the AI wrote to the official slogans. So, for example, the original slogan for Adobe, changing the world through digital experiences, the AI came up with designing your dreams. People liked that better. In fact, Apple has their slogan, think different. AI came up with innovation at its core. And people liked that better. Disney has where dreams come true. AI said the magic lives here. People like that better.
Because that's emotional. All those things you described are emotional connections to your heart and your head. Yeah.
Yep.
But is it interesting that it's AI that's coming up with the emotional connection, which has been the big
concern
here, right? Is it's taking the human out of stuff. I want to pick up on something you said, Robin, around communication, freeing us up as communication professionals to do the value-added work. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, "Should we fear AI?" And I said, "Yes, we should. We should fear that we don't understand it, we don't use it, and therefore we get stuck doing what we did as communication professionals when social media came about. And that is, we had that 1% pioneers that got out there and started playing and using it. We got others that talked about, how we should govern it and how we should make sure that we communicate well in terms of what happens on social media. And I said, because if we don't get ahead of the curve and say, we understand, we can advise organizations on things like AI, but most importantly, we're using it to free us up to be that advisor role. I think there is a big fear. I said this a couple of years ago when we first did the research, when I was talking at a couple of conferences. I said, let's learn from the past as communication professionals and get ahead on this one, because there is a whole lot of issues. As much as there's great stuff with it and efficiencies we're using with AI, there's a whole lot of issues around it too, where it needs a communication brain to say how we should be using it. Should we be acknowledging where the data is coming from? Should there be some policies, procedures around using AI in organizations? Because right now it's being used. And I tell you what, it'll be the people that use it for nefarious purposes that will be right ahead of this curve.
Yeah.
I want to get back to the issue of disclosure, because I think it's an important one. But first, in terms of that advisor role that you talk about, Adrian, this I think is critical, because what I'm seeing in most organizations, the ones that aren't banning it outright, is they're following the advice that I actually heard on a podcast from the Wharton School, I believe it was, saying it's not a collaborative tool. So because it's an individual tool, everybody should just get out there and use it. And that's what I'm seeing companies do, say, yeah, go use it. And this reminds me of any other poorly introduced technology in an organization. It's got to be 17 or 18 years ago that I was at a conference where I heard somebody from Pitney Bowes talk about the role of message mission control. That somebody has to get out there and say, look, we're introducing a new messaging technology in the company. Here's how it's going to make your life easier. Here are the experiences of people in the pilot group who used it. Here's how to use it. Here's how not to use it. Here's what it replaces. Here's what it doesn't replace. And then, working in the culture to make sure that those things take root, so that people are using it the way it's supposed to be. I got to tell you, I've seen more cases of Teams rolled out, especially as the pandemic sent people home, where they said, here's Teams, everyone. And you end up with people using it inconsistently and incorrectly. And
creating
we really
channels.
do need somebody to market these things and help people understand, here's how to use this in your job.
Yeah, 100%. That's like handing your staff each a pair of hairstylist scissors and saying, okay, here you go crazy, and have them run around and cut everybody's hair. I mean, you have to understand the purpose of it and the intent, and what does your organization stand for, and around things like disclosure. Also, copyright is a big issue right now. In Canada, there's several investigations underway, both at the federal and provincial level, into privacy concerns with AI. And so there's lots and lots of issues here that you just can't send people out willy-nilly saying, off you go, because uploading private data or proprietary information can have real consequences.
Yeah, that what you both are talking about, we're joined at the hip now in many cases, whether we ever wanted to be or not, but we are. If in an organization like I am, we're joined with IT. We have to be.
Yeah.
And so like with Teams, right, when you roll out something like Teams, it's not, as Shell said, here you go, right? It's like, this is what this is what it means, this is the right way to use it, this is how it's going to help you when you're collaborating on, same thing you can do with Yammer, Viva Engage now, communities. All of that communication has to happen before and then be reinforced. And I completely agree. It's the same thing with this. How you use it for good in the world or in our organization or with your clients, not just here, go do it.
Yeah. Isn't it funny though, Robert, when you get organizations have always done this, particularly, and I'm not bagging IT, but they just love rolling something out there. And then we're picking up the pieces of it being used properly or actually giving some governance or guidelines around it. And it's because our skill is in communication. It's about understanding the application and the usage and should we be doing X, Y, Z with this one?
Yeah.
And that's important.
When you do that, then when you go, oh, wait, we didn't put the right context around this. And then you try to put structure around it. And then you hear from your audience, how dare you? And it's like, look, we didn't have this 2 years ago. Like, but how did you do it before? And they don't like that. So it's like, do it right the first time. And you're right. You could, as Shell said, you could give people like, hey, go have some fun with this and look how you can use it to your advantage. But you got to put give them I don't even guardrails is the right word, but depending on your organization, you need to structure that right. So it's like you're giving them permission to do it, but you're giving them some context about here's some cool stuff you can do, like give them a place to start.
Yeah, I think some policies are important. One thing that I did in response to a request from one of our senior executives, this was to basically edit down a list of, lots and lots and lots of bullet points from a SWOT analysis. So eliminate redundancy, synthesize, categorize, edit, and I fed it all to ChatGPT one at a time, strengths and then weaknesses and then opportunities and threats. But the first thing I did with each of those was to go through those bullets and make sure, one, the company name wasn't in there, or our parent company's name, or anything that was proprietary that would not be good for us to have out there in the wild. So I synthesized it. Then when I got the results back, I had to pull up the original list of bullet points to make sure it didn't leave anything out that it shouldn't have, that it didn't fabricate anything, that everything was in the right category and the categories were properly labeled. So again, I was probably looking at 2 days work to do that by hand. It took me 3 hours to do it with ChatGPT, but it required that I think about the workflow, right? It's not just, I'm going to have ChatGPT do this. I have to establish a workflow for this. And this is one of the places where I think we can help is to talk to people about workflows. And I think there are two to look at. One is, how does your workflow change because you can use ChatGPT? And then what workflow elements do you have to implement because you used ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you've used?
And also when we look at it as being an efficiency tool, and then we start using it and going, actually, I'm spending more time in this one, because I have to say, some of the tools that I've looked at, you go, wow, there's a huge learning curve in here to get what it will actually do for you at the end of the day. So a lot of people are now spending time within some of the tools without actually thinking about that workflow or thinking about what it is that I want it to do for me. Because a lot of these tools are being developed with cleverness in mind, as this is a really clever tool to do X, Y, Z. But have they really looked at it from a personal level of, this solves this particular problem for this person? And so there's some you'll grab and you go, oh my God, this is so cool. And this is really very, very efficient. I mean, even early in the day, I remember playing with Crystal Knows on LinkedIn. And Crystal Knows was sitting in the background of LinkedIn and looking at your behavior. And it was then defining or able to talk about your style in terms of your DISC profile or your Myers-Briggs type indicator, and then started telling you how you should have a conversation with somebody, or what kind of words do you use. And it was great for giving tips and hints for the sales process or for the engagement process of someone. And I thought that was great, because it actually solved a problem that of insight that you didn't have before. So I think they're really important questions, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Shell.
You know, when you started down that road, Adrian, I thought you were going to say it will tell you when you need to talk to your therapist. Because, hey, you know. But it is, you know, I think there are still a lot of people out there. So coming back to the fear part of it, it's not even so much about, you know, using the tool necessarily, but people are still afraid about how much the big bad world knows about them. And those kind of insights can be really off-putting. So again, thinking about organizations, if you're going to send people the links and the ability to use some of these tools, then you also have to almost counsel them to say, don't be surprised it knows a lot about our organization, about you, about the world, about whatever, because it's out there.
Yeah.
And that raises, I think, the question about copyright and intellectual property, because these tools are scouring everything that is freely available on the web. And yeah, I get a little frustrated because I've studied this enough that I understand how it works on the back end. And I don't want to claim that I understand what a neural network is and how it works, but I understand the idea of learning. So it's not sampling, whether it's ChatGPT or Midjourney or the other image generators. There's not a large database of content and cherry picking little pieces of it to assemble. It's creating something wholly new based on what it knows. Now, when I'm going to be writing a white paper, and I've recently finished a white paper on wayfinding and the role of the general contractor in wayfinding, I read a ton of stuff that I found on the web. Now, you know, 40 years ago, I would have gone to a library, and the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature and the Dewey Decimal System would have been the tools that I used. In this instance, I used Google. I also used some ChatGPT. But what I did basically was go read research papers and academic papers and other resources on wayfinding, and I made a lot of notes, and then I wrote a white paper based on my notes. And nobody came after me and said, hey, you know what, you violated copyright because you read my article and used what you learned in your white paper. And yet when people find that ChatGPT did that, they file copyright infringement lawsuits. And I think it's a failure to really understand the way these things work. They're not lifting whole passages out. They're just, you know, I mean, you think about an artist, when they go to a gallery or flip through a coffee table book of art, they're influenced by what they're seeing, and it's going to be reflected in their future artwork. Same thing with Midjourney and DALL-E 2 and Stable Diffusion and Adobe Firefly, right? That's the way they work. They see a million images of cats. They learn what the pattern of a cat is, and now they can make their own cat.
Yeah.
The fact that they saw your picture of a cat doesn't mean that they impinged on your copyright.
Yeah.
I think the challenge comes if every newsletter article you write starts with "it was a dark and stormy night" or "it was the best of times, the worst of times." I think that it's those passages that you really have to, quote your source. But again, this is no different, Shell, as you point out, to back in the day when you're in college and you're doing research, cite your source. So if you've asked for something and you recognize that it was produced by an organization or an author or what have you, cite your source. You still have that responsibility to honor people's copyright when you are lifting whole sections of something to use as part of something else.
Mm.
Yep.
I don't want to send us off topic, but I thought of it when you were talking about images. I just wanted to say it because it's another one of those uses. So I was speaking at a different, not IABC, different organization, a conference in June, and I have a personal subscription to Visme because it helps me create really amazing presentations. I can save them as video format. I can save them in PowerPoint. I can do all the things, right? And they had this huge library of images that you can choose from that are part of your subscription, which is helpful. However, I couldn't find one specific thing. I was typing in something a million different ways, trying to find something that would convey what I wanted, and it wouldn't. And then I noticed at the bottom, because I hadn't used it in a few months, it was like, "Do you want to try AI?" Okay. And guess what? With the right search terms, it gave me exactly what I wanted.
What you wanted, yeah.
And it's like, okay, and it wasn't stealing. It's one of those generic, it's not anybody's face, not anything that's a copyright or something that I have to be concerned about. But that's another instance where it can save you a ton of time. If you're trying to convey things through image, if AI is done, and I've also seen the things where people tried to do their headshots in AI, and sometimes it's great. And then sometimes it comes back and you have 4 arms or whatever, but when it's done well, that's awesome because visually communicating, it can get very precise if it's a really good tool for doing that. And that's what happened in my case. And I just wanted to share that with everybody because it is helpful when you just can't find the right image.
I hardly ever use a stock photo service anymore because Midjourney mostly gives me what I need. We have a question here, and it's from Ginger Homan, fellow. Are any of you using AI for measurement of outcomes? And if so, how? For example, I've used it to synthesize comments from feedback, but wondering how else I could use it.
Yeah, I must admit, I've used it for the same, Ginger,
Same.
in terms of synthesizing comments, but haven't used it for anything in terms of the analysis and, pulling. I'd love it if it does ROI. That would be lovely. The measurements would change, but mostly for me, it's been on that feedback. I don't know about you, the rest of you.
And that alone is a huge time saver. If you've got
Absolutely.
tremendous survey results and a ton of open-ended feedback, for example, that will save you hours and hours. Yeah.
I haven't used it for this yet, but I know it's good with numbers. So if you feed it quantifiable results from, say, a survey and ask for an analysis, I bet it would come back with some interesting feedback. Like I said, I haven't done that yet, but.
And analysis, it is good for. I've used it quite a bit in the analysis of surveys and putting things into headers. I did with a big, a huge amount of data a few weeks back, and I gave it some parameters in terms of looking for themes within the content, and it was able to search that out, and then you could actually quantify the numbers of repetitions in it. And there is, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there is some really good tools out there using AI in the research, specifically for research.
I bet you could, I haven't done it, but I bet you could use it to look for benchmarks or comparables to see how your organization is doing. That's an area that we've all struggled with evaluation and measurement. Sometimes you get results, 82% of employees said X, but what's the benchmark? What is 82% as good as it ever gets in it for organizations, or those kinds of questions? So I bet you could use it for that. Which makes me think I should give that.
Ginger also asks, if you use ChatGPT, how do you cite the source? And I think there's a few ways. If you're just in the OpenAI version, it's not going to give you citations. But if you use Bing Chat, which uses ChatGPT 4, it actually does give you footnotes, and that gives you the source. But I've asked ChatGPT for research that has been done on a particular topic and specifically asked it to cite the source in my prompt. And if you do that, it will give you a list and tell you where it got each data point.
Yeah, I did exactly the same, and so it gave me the 5 or 6 authors that it had got. It didn't tell you which piece came from where, but it came up with the list of here's the content, and here's the list of sources that it got that content from. Now, was it giving verbatim comments? I don't know, right? Unless I went back and did the whole exercise. So this is where you kind of go, okay, there's how much faith do I put into it, and how do I then acknowledge to my audience that this is where I've got the information from, and maybe that's we need to do that just so that we are being very open about how we got this information and pulled that together. Because when it's topics that are close to our hearts or we understand about, we get a real sense for, oh yeah, that makes sense, and yes, that's brilliant. That's just saved me a whole lot of time, and I would have said almost exactly the same thing. But when it's content that we're not so sure about, do we blindly trust that it's pulled the right resource and put it into the right context? The interesting thing, I actually asked ChatGPT around what jobs of the future there's going to be for AI, and I got some interesting results around that. But the more you talk to AI about communication, I keep using the term communication professional because that's where we're at in our profession. It comes back and it's got this real skew towards writing. I've noticed it keeps talking about writers and editors and things like that with the bent to AI. But I did, and I'll quote this one. ChatGPT gave me one of the jobs of the future is an AI communication specialist. And it says, as an AI technologies become more prevalent, there'll be a need for professionals who can effectively communicate and explain AI concepts to the wider audience. AI communication specialists will bridge the gap between technical experts and non-technical stakeholders, translating complex AI concepts into understandable language.
Oh, sort of like a legal communicator, right?
I know.
We're talking to engineers. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually, Shell, I've actually really been impressed with Bing. I've used it more often than ChatGPT because I do find that I don't know, it seems to be a better fit for what I'm looking for. And I do like that it'll tell you where the information came from. And it does all the same things that ChatGPT does in terms of, would you like to ask another question, or do you want to know more, or that kind of thing. So you have that ability to drill down if you want to. But it's been actually quite an impressive tool that you don't have to sign up for. I mean, it's just part of Bing. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've been enjoying, there's a new one that was just released about a week ago called Claude. And I've been playing with that one. And I like the output from that. I'm not a big fan of Google's Bard yet. I think that one needs a lot of work. I remember seeing Shelley Palmer do a side-by-side demo of ChatGPT and Bard. And the prompt was to create a table of the top 10 dog breeds in the U.S. include lifetime cost of ownership, primary health issues, and average lifespan. And there were some other items in the columns that he wanted. Bard said, "I'm an AI chatbot. I can't do that." And ChatGPT said, "Here's your table." So, yeah.
Wow. So shop around. Shop around.
Sorry?
I just said shop around.
That's right. Yeah. See what gives you the best output. We were talking kind of about disclosure. How do you feel about the need to disclose that you've used AI? I'll tell you that when I did that SWOT analysis synthesizing, I did not disclose to the executive that I used ChatGPT. My feeling about that was that I wouldn't have told them that I used a calculator if I had to crunch some numbers. It was just a tool to produce an output. and I felt fine about not disclosing it. But under what circumstances would you disclose that your content or your output was produced using an AI tool?
We use it for research. So like we would never just take anything that an AI tool spit out and give it to a client and pretend that we created that ourselves. I feel like that's an ethical line that you don't cross. Can you use parts of it? Sure. But I think at the end of the day, we mostly use it for that reason, because they're paying for us to do things. It's good for research. It's good for prompts for inspiration, as we've talked about. Sometimes you can get a phrase or two that you think, oh, that's an interesting turn of phrase. I'll include that. But just copy paste the entire thing? No.
I think there's a big thing about context here, and I think this is a really important issue, is the context in which we're using AI to help us. So I think, and this is a personal bent on this one, if we were using it for sorting or analysis of something, maybe not. If we were doing it on research or producing an article, and we're using the majority of that content is come from AI, I think it's like everything else is citing that sources. That's what you've used. There is actually no harm in doing that. But if we're using it as that tool in the background that really is to sort data or put things into headers and things like that, you're right, Chell. It's about using a calculator to generate your maths, right? You really don't need to. But I think there's going to be some real active discussions around this moving forward, because if we look back at the world of social media, and it's only just recently that the Australian government are now starting to put very heavy penalties on things like misinformation and disinformation, but it's taken us 20 years to get there of social media being used terribly inappropriate, right? And there's been no control. I think we need to have these discussions much earlier in the piece when it comes to AI.
Yeah, we have already had an instance of an image being used by one of our 2024 presidential candidates, putting two of his opponents in an unflattering light that were both, the image was produced using AI, and we're going to have AI video. I mean, deepfakes can already be done. It's just going to get easier and easier. We're going to see a ChatGPT-like text prompt tool that will create video in fairly short order. You can already do it with music and voice. So video can't be far behind. So I think we need to be vigilant in terms of misinformation and disinformation that might be spread about our organization or our brands or our leaders, because it's going to be easier to do. And in politics, it's done to win. In business, it's done to influence the markets, right? I mean, if you want to short a stock, you can use AI and social media to do that in pretty short order.
Because we had talked earlier about the ethical considerations, and I think this is where the human element comes in. So in our own code of ethics within IABC and with the code of conduct in most organizations, there are very specific things that help people walk through that decision-making tree. And as you have described, there's some cases where it's like clearly like, right, I'm using a calculator, whatever. There are others where it's like, does this feel wrong to you? How would you feel if it got published in the, your local newspaper that you did this kind of thing? And if it's sticking in your gut, that's like, it's like, well, then you probably need to reevaluate that. If there's no question, and then again, this is partly not intuition, but just who we are as communication professionals. We know the difference. And if you have any hesitation, at least now, while it's still a little bit on the frontier edge of things, then you really need to be careful about that. And I think that's like common sense. That's common sense. I don't think it's that complicated necessarily. If you feel weird about it, then you need to go back and cite your sources or do what you need to do to make sure that you have, cross the T's, dotted the I's. There will come a time with legislation and other things, because it's already happening, where there will be more cases around that, but you can fall back on and say, this is allowed, this is not, right? Whether it's federally, locally, within your organization, whatever.
and hopefully, we're not seeing people that are saying, well, unless I'm told otherwise, I will just do that, which we will get. I know it's one of those things. A really good example of doing that is the first, was it Valentine's Day? I thought, I'll put out a Valentine's Day poem, and I thought, I am the worst poet in the world. So I did ask AI to write me a poem, and it came out absolutely brilliant. And of course, I'm not going to change anything. So I made sure when I popped that out, I said, this was generated by ChatGPT. Happy Valentine's Day. It just made sense to do that, to say, well, I had no contribution to this whatsoever, but I wanted to share something that was actually quite good. So I just acknowledged the source, put it out there. But that's the moral compass that goes, you would do that. I'm not going to take credit because it's created this brand new poem, because I had no idea where it was getting it from and where it's taken the information at that time. Right?
We have a question from a participant here. This is Brian Kilgore. I think Brian's still in Toronto. How do consultants charge for AI info they pass on? How willing are clients to pay $300 an hour for either the traditional time to produce something or the actual time to manage a project?
It's a really interesting question. One of the things I'd turn around with that one is I generally don't charge on time. I charge on outcome, and that's where my brain goes when it comes to that. Because yes, if there's efficiencies, and we would pass it on to the client, but what they're looking for, I think, is the outcome for what it is that you're doing. So if that is a time-based project, then you're giving them the time. I mean, that's how I look at it as a consultant. If I am actually time-based, that's what I'm charging them for. And if AI is giving me the efficiency, the outcome is really what I would be looking at from a client point of view.
This really underscores the whole problem of charging by the hour for what we do. Truly, time has nothing to do with the 42 years that I have spent accumulating knowledge and having experiences and so forth. So whether I can write a news release in 20 minutes, which in most cases I can, how much is that worth? Like, is it worth 20 minutes or is it worth 42 years of experience? So I think you have to look at ChatGPT in the same light. Like what we tend to we try to bill based on project and outcomes like Adrian. It is tough though when clients insist on you charging by the hour, which I don't sell time, I sell expertise.
Yes.
I remember having a conversation, this had to be 35 years ago, with Mark Schumann, another IABC fellow. This was when we were both working for William M. Mercer. And I was objecting to the notion of value add in billing. And he said, okay, so if I'm in the shower and I have this idea for a client that solves the client's problem, and it's based on the 30 years I have been in this business doing this work, that I was able to have that brainstorm, do I only charge them for the 2 minutes in the shower?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, they couldn't have done it themselves in 2 minutes in the shower. So he actually turned me around on the whole idea of value add. And with AI, it's not just that you used AI, you've got the experience that helps you craft the prompt that you submit to get the output. And then you're probably going to go back and ask additional questions. And then you're going to do something with that output. You're not just going to copy and paste it into a report to the client.
I worked in HR consulting too. I worked for Buck Consultants for a few years, and I worked for a boutique firm. And I agree with everything you're all saying. And we were working on a major initiative where maybe there was one, either one big output or there were several things along the way that were part of this initiative. You started with, what does the client want? What does success look like? Yes. And so you're building, which is the hallmark of strategic planning, right? What is success look like? How are you building back from there? And then we would estimate our time and stuff and say, okay, within X number of hours is what we think it's going to take to do this. And then we go to them with that fee and say the fee is going to be X amount because we know how long it's going to take us to do that. And then that's the way typically we did it with clients. It wasn't by the hour. It was, we are going to produce the following things. These things are going to be ready by November 15th. And here are all the steps along the way. And the fee is this. Are you in agreement with this? And if this goes out of scope, then we'll charge you extra. We go back and look at that again and say that's a change order, basically. But yeah, because it's about our expertise and are we delivering what you need for the results you want, not a thing that we're delivering, but how are we influencing your audience or getting the result that you want?
There are people out there now that are selling their services as prompt engineers, right?
Yes.
And there are people selling prompts on prompt marketplaces. So, I have no problem charging the value of the output for this based on the knowledge I've accumulated both about communications and about prompt engineering.
And that's one of the new roles of the future too, is being able to write really good prompts for AI, because getting that right is really important. So you get experience in doing that, you're getting the right outcomes in a much more efficient way.
And writing a good prompt for ChatGPT is different than writing a really good prompt for Midjourney, right? I mean, you have to learn a lot to get exactly what you're looking for from Midjourney.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that I use a lot of images from Midjourney in my communications internally where I work. And I rarely disclose them because I wouldn't have disclosed the artist that I'd hired or the stock photo service that I used. But if I'm enhancing an image of something real, if I'm out at a project site, for example, I take a picture and then I import that into Adobe Firefly and say, put a taco truck here. I will say that this image has been enhanced with Adobe Firefly because you're looking at something that wasn't real, and I don't want to trick anybody into thinking that they're looking at something real that isn't.
These are the ethical questions I think that are starting to bubble up as people learn more and use these tools more. Is what are the ethics of what we're doing, and when is it art? When is it self-expression? When is it just putting a taco truck on a construction site? So
that's when it needs trust, right?
Yeah.
So unless we are being really clear with our audiences, people will start disengaging because they don't trust the source from us, because they go, that was clearly something that was generated in AI, and you didn't say this, so I'm not sure I can trust the things that you're putting out there.
Credibility is really going to be on the line here, I feel, for a lot of organizations as we move forward and start using more of these tools. The last thing you want is for someone to call you out on using a tool and you've not disclosed it, or in a way, as we've talked about, where it's more substantive than put these things in alphabetical order or some such. I think that credibility and truth have been under fire for a few years now. And this is just one more thing that causes people to say, are you being honest with me? Is this true? Is this misinformation? Is it real? And I think that, these are wonderful tools. And I think it behooves all of us to make sure that we are staying on top of these things so that people can trust what we're doing.
Absolutely agree. It's interesting because we've been using AI for many, many years. And I think we heard earlier that this is new to a lot of people. No, it's not. They just didn't know they were using it. If they ever got a recommendation for a product on Amazon, they were using AI, or recommendations of what to view on Netflix. That's AI. I've been using Otter for many years. This is it's a recording tool that creates a transcript, but it uses artificial intelligence to figure out what you were actually saying when it didn't understand.
Yes.
And you're on a shopping website and you go to chat because you're having a problem. It's a bot or it's AI.
Right. It's an AI bot.
It's only when you're having a real big problem that eventually you get a person.
Let me elevate this to the next
exactly. I want to talk to a real person. Thank you.
I do think it's important people understand that at some point this is going to cause job loss. It already has. It's creative destruction. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But there's an insurance company in Japan that fired all its claims adjusters because the AI does it just fine. And this is something that, as communicators, I think we're going to need to provide some counsel in our organizations too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where having a safe space to explore AI, I think, is really important. I think as a network of communication professionals globally, we can support each other in saying, let's have a safe space where we can go into something and say, I actually know nothing about AI, but I want to join a group or a discussion where I'm starting to pick up my knowledge and skills. We don't want people to jump to the fact that, oh, I'm already behind the ball and I don't understand it.
Yep.
I mean, sources like there's an AI for that.com, I think is great, because you can go in there and find an AI to do whatever it is that you want, and it'll give you a whole list of AI tools. And that's a great place to start and then explore and then share the learnings from it.
The ChatGPT subreddit is excellent too, by the way.
Okay,
and I'm sorry to say that we are out of time. We're actually over time. So I do want to let everybody know that our next Circle of Fellows is scheduled for Thursday, August 17th. We will be back to noon Eastern time. That's probably because we're not accommodating anybody from Australia or India or what have you. The topic is from information to inspiration, meh to magnificent. This is all about content creation, and we have a great panel. 3 of the 4 slots are confirmed. That's Cindy Schmieg, Jennifer Waugh, and Brad Whitworth. I'll be joining them and a 4th panelist who has yet to be confirmed. So that'll be coming up again at noon Eastern on Thursday, August 17th. I want to thank the panel. It's been a great discussion. I think it could easily go another hour. Also, thanks to Anna Willie for putting all of this together and all the behind-the-scenes work that she does every month. This wouldn't happen without Anna. So until next month, thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.